The crisp white envelope landed on the polished table as I walked into his office. No greeting, not even a glance, just that sterile rectangle with my name printed in a font that looked aggressively perfect, like someone had meticulously checked it a dozen times. "Effective immediately," Mark said, his eyes glued to his monitor. "Your new title is now Strategic Initiatives Coordinator. Compensation will be adjusted accordingly." That was the extent of it. No acknowledgement of my past achievements, no sign of gratitude. Just a bizarre new job title I'd never encountered and a 55% reduction in my salary. I didn't react outwardly, not because I was stunned into silence, but because a slow burn of something much colder had already started to spread through me. My name is Olivia Hayes, and I'm 42 years old. Until 6 minutes ago, I held the position of Senior Director of Global Accounts at Sterling Tech. Just last month, I finalized the most significant deal in the company's history, a $1.5 billion agreement to supply advanced software solutions to a multinational corporation. 8 grueling months filled with late nights, deciphering complex international regulations, and countless high-stakes negotiations, and I had navigated every step of it myself. I should have been celebrating a major victory. Instead, I found myself sitting across from a man who couldn't even be bothered to look at me. Moments earlier, I had been standing just outside this very office, reviewing notes for the post-deal implementation plan. That's when the door swung open. A young woman, maybe 28, named Ashley, stepped out first, looking unnervingly cheerful, practically bouncing on the balls of her feet as if she already ran the place. I recognized her, bright-eyed, ambitious, and frankly, out of her depth. I had supervised her during her summer internship just a year prior. Behind her, Mark was chuckling, their laughter echoing in the otherwise silent hallway. They exchanged a casual handshake, their ease and confidence almost perfectly in sync. Neither of them noticed me observing their little performance. And now here I was, holding a letter dated yesterday, informing me that I was no longer in charge of the division I had single-handedly built over the past decade. They hadn't just demoted me, they had quietly and efficiently tried to erase my existence, and they'd even done it a day early. I carefully folded the letter, slipped it into my handbag, and rose from the chair. This wasn't the moment for confrontation. This was the time to absorb every detail, every nuance of their betrayal. Every insincere smile, every dismissive silence, every name involved in this charade. They believed I was finished. But the game had barely begun. The nameplate outside my former office was gone. Not replaced, not misspelled, simply gone. Where it had proudly displayed Olivia Hayes, Senior Director, there was now just a blank space. The frosted glass door that once led to my office, my domain, now stood bare, as if my 15 years of dedication to Sterling Tech had never happened. I stood there for a long moment, a strange mix of disbelief and something akin to grief washing over me. That office, my sanctuary, was now beyond my reach. A junior employee hurried past, struggling with a tower of files, and did a double-take. "Can I help you find something?" she asked innocently, clearly not recognizing the woman who used to oversee half the company. I offered a strained smile. "No, I'm exactly where I need to be." And with that, I turned away, my fingers tightening around the handles of a cardboard box filled with the remnants of my professional life. HR had helpfully labeled it Olivia's personal belongings and directed me towards the elevators. My new workspace was located 5 floors below, in a part of the building I hadn't visited since my early days as a junior associate. It wasn't an office, not even close. It was a cramped cubicle, devoid of windows and a phone, the kind with flimsy carpeted partitions and a flickering fluorescent light overhead. Someone had left a tangled mess of phone cords in the drawer. The air hung heavy with the scent of stale toner and industrial-strength lemon disinfectant. No nameplate, no welcome note, just a sticky note on the dusty monitor that read, "Olivia, system access will be set up by end of day." I sank into the cheap, uncomfortable chair and took a slow look around. On the wall facing me hung the updated company organizational chart, freshly printed and encased in plastic. I walked over to it, my heart sinking with each step, hoping to find some trace of my former position. I wasn't there. Not at the top, not in the fine print, not even under the list of project contributors. Ashley Davies had taken my place, Director of Global Strategy. The caption beneath her professionally staged headshot proclaimed, "A fresh perspective for Sterling Tech's global future." I closed my eyes, a sharp ache blossoming in my chest. It wasn't pure anger I felt. It was more like a profound sense of loss, a mourning for the version of myself that had poured her heart and soul into this company. I hadn't just been replaced. I had been systematically erased. Later that afternoon, a young marketing assistant, her arms overflowing with presentation folders, stopped by my desolate cubicle. "These need to be delivered to Ashley for tomorrow's executive briefing," she chirped, oblivious to the irony. I nodded silently and took the folders from her. As she walked away, I noticed a page sticking out of one of the folders. It was a printed slide titled, "Project Phoenix Finalization, Team led by Olivia Hayes." My photo was there, a picture taken after the celebratory signing ceremony, champagne glasses still in our hands. But someone had taken a thick red marker and brutally crossed out my face with a large X. The slide had clearly been reprinted with Ashley's name and picture in the final presentation deck. I returned to my cubicle, opened the file cabinet beneath the cramped desk, and began flipping through the rows of meticulously labeled binders, the ones I had created, organized, and color-coded, filled with detailed notes from every stage of the grueling negotiations. Except now, every single tab that had once proudly displayed my initials had been overwritten with AD. Olivia Hayes had vanished. Ashley Davies had seamlessly stepped into her shoes. Her hurried, looping initials were scrawled across contracts I had poured my blood, sweat, and countless sleepless nights into crafting. I gently closed the drawer and sat very still, the silence in the cramped cubicle amplifying the buzzing in my ears. I didn't shed a single tear. I didn't erupt in anger. I simply let the heavy silence settle around me, a suffocating blanket of disbelief. What stung the most wasn't the loss of the prestigious office, the impressive title, or even the credit for the monumental deal. It was the ease with which they had done it, the utter disregard for my years of dedication. And in that moment, a cold, hard realization washed over me. If they could erase me this quickly and completely, it meant they had never truly valued me in the first place. I hadn't had a decent night's sleep in 8 months. My days and nights had blurred into a relentless cycle of work, from the initial email exchanges at 3:20 a.m. to the final video conferences with the client in Zurich that stretched past midnight. I was the sole person holding all the intricate pieces of that $1.5 billion deal together. And now, sitting in this depressing cubicle with someone else's initials plastered all over my hard work, I couldn't fathom how they could have forgotten that so easily. No, they hadn't forgotten. They had simply never bothered to truly understand the depth of my commitment. There were nights I reviewed critical technical specifications on the floor of a generic airport hotel in Frankfurt, my eyes burning from jet lag and exhaustion. There were mornings I smoothed my wrinkled blazer over a thin hospital gown, taking crucial calls from a Zurich hospital after collapsing from sheer exhaustion and dehydration. And there was one particularly painful December, just 2 days before Christmas, when I sat alone in a bustling airport cafe, watching my mother's FaceTime call ring unanswered on my phone. For the first time in 17 years, I had missed our annual family holiday dinner. She had said she understood, but I still saw the faint trace of hurt behind her forced smile. I had given Sterling Tech everything, every spare hour, every personal sacrifice, every ounce of my energy. And when Stellaris Corp, our fiercest competitor, had approached me 3 months prior with an enticing offer to lead their global strategy division, I had politely declined. My loyalty lies with Sterling, I had told their headhunter. They had offered a significant stock option package, I had still said no. Instead, I had returned to my office, closed the door, and continued to pour myself into finalizing the contract. That contract had become my lifeline, my legacy. I had meticulously crafted every clause, scrutinized every risk assessment, expertly navigated complex cultural nuances, and even caught critical errors that our own legal team had overlooked. And at the very heart of that intricate document was Clause 51C. It wasn't part of the standard boilerplate. It hadn't even been suggested by our legal department. The idea had come during a late-night strategy dinner in Paris when the client's CEO had leaned across the table and said, his voice low and serious, "We've been burned before. We need absolute assurance. If you are not personally overseeing the implementation, the deal is off." So I had quietly added the clause myself, without informing Mark or Ashley. I had written it in plain, unambiguous language. Operational oversight for the duration of the implementation phase shall remain under the direct supervision of Olivia Hayes in the event of any internal reassignment. Client reserves the right to void this agreement should this condition not be met. They had signed. We had celebrated. And now, the very sentence I had penned to safeguard the client's trust had become my only shield, hidden in plain sight, overlooked by those too arrogant to believe I was irreplaceable. I leaned back in my squeaky chair, my fists clenched tightly beneath the cheap particle board desk, not out of blind rage, but with a newfound sense of unwavering resolve. They might think they had stolen the deal from me, but I had never truly relinquished control. The strange and often unsettling thing about betrayal is that it invariably leaves echoes in its wake. Sitting in that drab gray cubicle, staring at Ashley Davies' name plastered all over contracts I had practically bled to complete, my mind drifted back to one particular night, one singular moment when I had truly felt seen and appreciated. And it hadn't been within the sterile walls of Sterling Tech. It had been in Zurich, during the final, grueling phase of negotiations. The pressure had been immense, pushing every member of our team to their breaking point. Legal teams had clashed over intricate jurisdictional clauses. Engineering leads had inexplicably kept changing critical specifications midstream. And the client's board of directors was growing increasingly impatient and restless. The entire multi-billion-dollar deal was hanging by threads that only I seemed to be able to see and hold together. Late one Friday evening, the CEO of the client company, a distinguished man named Klaus Richter, had sent me a simple text message. Dinner. Just us. No agenda. 7:30 p.m. Feller of Stress. I had hesitated for a moment. We still had several unresolved drafts to review, but something in the way he had worded the message suggested that this wasn't about finalizing paperwork. When I arrived at the quiet, elegantly wood-paneled restaurant tucked away near the Zurich Opera House, he was already seated at a secluded corner table. No assistants hovering nearby, no laptops open, just a glass of rich red wine and a neatly folded linen napkin. "I wanted to speak with you off the record, Ms. Hayes," he began, his voice calm and measured. "Not as executives, but as people." I remained silent, simply listening intently. He then recounted their experience with their previous major acquisition, a multi-billion-dollar aerospace contract that had abruptly collapsed during the crucial implementation phase because the lead negotiator had been unexpectedly removed from the project. No explanation had been given. The replacement negotiator had lacked the necessary context, the established rapport, and the crucial credibility. "It cost us 3 years," he had said, his gaze unwavering, "and a significant portion of our hard-earned reputation." Then he had looked directly into my eyes, his expression serious. "Ms. Hayes, we are not just signing this agreement with Sterling Tech. We are signing it with you. If you disappear from this deal, then the deal disappears with you." In that precise moment, I had felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Not mere praise or acknowledgement of performance metrics, but genuine, unwavering trust. I had nodded, meeting his gaze, and promised him that I would personally see this complex project through from its very beginning to its successful completion. Back in my quiet hotel room that night, a handwritten envelope had been slipped discreetly under my door. Inside was a short, elegant note penned in deliberate cursive, to the one who earned our confidence through action, not merely a title. We do not forget those who carry such weight with grace. K.R. Klaus Richter. I had carefully tucked that letter into my planner, safely behind a stack of business cards and boarding passes. No one at Sterling Tech had ever seen it. They wouldn't have cared. But now, as I sat in the suffocating silence of my cramped cubicle, surrounded by the ghostly remnants of my erased professional identity, I unfolded that creased, but still intact letter. They could replace my name on every internal chart and presentation slide, but they could never erase the significance of that quiet dinner in Zurich. The following morning, I arrived at the Sterling Tech headquarters at precisely 8 a.m., just as I had done faithfully for the past 15 years. I knew no one expected me to show up. After their calculated actions, stripping me of my title, slashing my salary, and replacing my name as if I were nothing more than a replaceable cog in a machine, they likely assumed I would simply vanish, quietly lick my wounds and walk away, or perhaps storm out in a dramatic display of rage. That's how most people reacted when they were so publicly and humiliatingly undermined. But I showed up, my hair neatly pulled back, my blazer crisp and pressed, my gaze fixed forward, and not a single soul in that building seemed to know how to react to my continued presence. Ashley walked past my cubicle once that morning. She didn't acknowledge me directly, just offered a quick, sidelong glance, her expression unreadable, a strange mix of uncertainty and perhaps a hint of awkwardness. I gave her nothing in return, no forced smile, no trace of bitterness, no reaction whatsoever. Across the hall, Mark's usually tightly closed office door remained slightly ajar. He hadn't spoken a single word to me since delivering that soul-crushing demotion notice, not even a perfunctory debriefing. I caught his reflection once in the glass of his door. He looked directly at me for a fleeting second, then quickly averted his gaze. I didn't chase after them. I didn't demand an explanation or a chance to be heard. Instead, I turned back to my computer screen and began composing emails. Not job applications, not angry resignation letters, blueprints. One by one, I reconnected with former colleagues, people I trusted implicitly, brilliant engineers I had once flown across continents with to secure crucial deals, procurement specialists who owed me more than one favor for helping them meet impossible deadlines, even two former Sterling Tech executives who were now quietly leading successful teams at rival companies. I didn't directly ask for any immediate assistance. I simply asked questions, subtle, strategic questions designed to gather information. If a highly experienced professional in aerospace regulatory compliance were to become available in the next fiscal quarter, would that be of interest to your team? Do you still oversee the postal integration workflows for your division? How would you currently describe the overall morale within your international operations team? I wasn't planting seeds of immediate chaos. I was carefully checking the soil conditions, assessing the landscape. That Thursday, during my designated lunch break, my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number, the area code, 202, indicating Washington, D.C. Olivia Hayes? A calm, professional voice inquired on the other end. Yes, speaking, I replied, glancing down at my muted computer screen. My name is Eleanor Vance. I'm an independent contract law attorney. I have just completed a thorough review of the agreement pertaining to the Sterling Tech/Urava Aviation jet deal. I sat up straighter in my uncomfortable chair, my senses suddenly on high alert. She continued, her voice steady and confident. I believe you were the author of Clause 51C. I was, I confirmed carefully, my heart starting to beat a little faster. There was a brief pause on the line. Then she said, her tone conveying a hint of admiration, it's remarkably well drafted, airtight, simple language, clearly stated intent, and fully enforceable in any international court of law. I don't think they fully grasp what you gave them. I let out a slow, steady exhale, a mixture of relief and quiet confirmation settling in my chest. "They're blind," she added, her voice laced with a touch of disbelief. That clause was the most strategically brilliant part of the entire agreement, and they've completely overlooked its significance. That night, I stayed late at the office, not actively working, but simply observing the quiet hum of the building around me. Ashley left early, presumably to celebrate her newfound position. Mark didn't emerge from his corner office at all. I sat alone in my cramped, dimly lit cubicle, the soft glow of the desktop monitor illuminating my face, my right hand resting gently on the locked file drawer that contained the original, signed copy of the Urava Aviation contract. Still bearing my ink, still initialed with OH. I said nothing. I sent no emails, no cryptic messages, no veiled warnings. Because true power, when you genuinely possess it, doesn't need to shout or make grand pronouncements. It waits patiently, confidently, until the precise moment it is needed. And they had absolutely no idea that I still held the key. I didn't travel to France. Ashley did. She departed early Monday morning, confidently striding through the Dulles International Airport executive terminal, radiating the smug air of someone who believed they had rightfully earned their place. First-class boarding pass in hand, her new, impeccably pressed blazer bearing the Sterling Tech logo, and carrying a brand-new, company-issued leather briefcase that I had once personally selected for high-level executive travel. The irony wasn't lost on me. I heard through the office grapevine that she smiled throughout the entire boarding process, practically giddy with excitement. I didn't wish her luck. I didn't utter a single word because I knew something she didn't. The client's sprawling corporate headquarters were located in Toulouse, a sleek, modern structure of marble and glass that I knew intimately. I had been there 3 times in the past year, knew which espresso in the lobby was actually drinkable, which elevator had a tendency to lag, and precisely how the CEO's meticulous assistant preferred her important documents to be formatted. By the time Ashley's flight landed at 10:12 a.m. local time in Toulouse, she had already enthusiastically sent a check-in selfie to someone in Sterling Tech's HR department. What she didn't know, what none of them at Sterling Tech knew, was that my name, Olivia Hayes, wasn't just a signature on the final page of the contract. It was intricately woven into the very fabric of the entire deal. The official message from Urava Aviation's legal department hit Sterling Tech headquarters like a physical blow. At precisely 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time, a formal email landed in the inboxes of key executives. It was brief, cold, and devastatingly precise. Per Clause 51C of the executed agreement, this contract is explicitly contingent upon the post-deal implementation and transition being personally led by Ms. Olivia Hayes. We do not recognize any substitutes. Therefore, all further meetings are hereby cancelled. The email had been addressed to everyone who mattered: Mark, Ashley, the entire legal and compliance team, and even the members of the Sterling Tech Board of Directors. There was no polite softening of the blow, no room for negotiation. And just like that, the carefully orchestrated $1.5 billion handover had been unilaterally cancelled because the one person who truly understood the complexities of the deal wasn't in France, and no one had even bothered to consult with her. I learned about the email not from Mark or any other executive, but from a wide-eyed junior analyst who walked past my cubicle, his expression a mixture of shock and disbelief. He didn't say a word, but his face conveyed everything. Whispers began to circulate in the break rooms, in the crowded elevator lobbies, and even in supposedly private Slack channels disguised as routine team check-ins. No one dared to utter my name aloud, but they didn't need to. The story, as these things inevitably do, had begun to leak. Apparently, someone on the corporate communications team had naively attempted to spin the situation into a positive press blurb, something light, a narrative about strategic internal restructuring. An hour later, the draft press release had mysteriously vanished from the shared drive. Rumor had it that Mark had personally ordered the entire thread to be deleted and had issued a stern warning to the internal communications team. No coverage, not a single word about the disastrous trip to France. But it was already too late. I didn't need to be in that sterile conference room in Toulouse. I didn't need to raise my voice in anger or post a scathing expose online. I simply had to wait. And I did. By 7:45 p.m. that evening, I was still sitting quietly at my desk, sipping lukewarm coffee and watching the unread messages pile up in my company email inbox. The subject lines told the whole story. Client delay, urgent. Need immediate clarification regarding Eurava contract, Clause 51C. Do you have any insight? All of them were sent in a frantic flurry, none of them directly addressed to me, yet my name and the implications of my absence were palpable in every single sentence. Ashley didn't show her face in the office the next morning. Mark didn't call. But I overheard someone in the hallway mention, in a hushed tone, that she had been seen crying in the executive restroom. Maybe that snippet of office gossip was true. Maybe it wasn't. I honestly didn't care, because I had done absolutely nothing except ensure that my indispensable contributions were remembered at the most critical moment. And they, in their arrogance and short-sightedness, had done everything in their power to make me feel forgotten. And now, they were locked out of a billion-dollar deal that I no longer had any obligation to defend. By 9 a.m. the following day, the entire executive floor was practically vibrating with palpable panic. You could feel it through the thin, muffled walls of my lowly cubicle, the frantic pace of hurried footsteps, the sharp, strained tone of voices attempting to sound professional but failing miserably. Not a single forced smile was exchanged. No one made direct eye contact. I didn't need a formal calendar invitation to know exactly what was unfolding behind those closed office doors. Mark had undoubtedly called an emergency high-level meeting while I sat quietly downstairs, pretending to work on a report that I knew would never actually be read by anyone. The top brass at Sterling Tech was in full-blown crisis mode. Phones rang incessantly. The legal team huddled behind locked doors, their hushed voices barely audible. The public relations department frantically drafted 3 different versions of a press release, none of which ever saw the light of day. And in the main boardroom, the atmosphere was reportedly anything but calm. A former colleague, someone who owed me more than one quiet professional favor, sent me a brief text message that simply read, "Mark's trying to throw the entire blame on legal. It's not going well." They were desperately trying to spin the narrative. First, Mark had apparently claimed that Clause 51C had somehow slipped through the cracks due to the legal team being understaffed. Then, he had audaciously argued that the client was overreacting and would surely come around with the right, carefully crafted diplomatic wording. Next, in a truly spectacular display of misplaced blame, he had even tried to accuse me of being too involved in the deal in the first place. That particular piece of information had made me chuckle quietly to myself, a bitter, almost sardonic sound in the silence of my cubicle. I later heard that a senior member of the board of directors, a woman named Eleanor Caldwell, known for her sharp intellect, strategic thinking, and a demeanor that rarely involved raising her voice, had finally cut through the cacophony of excuses and deflections. She had personally reviewed the contract twice before its final execution. She had raised her hand slowly and said, her voice calm but firm, "Let's stop pretending this was some kind of clerical oversight." I vividly recall a closed-door conversation just weeks before the signing where Mark explicitly stated that Olivia was somehow making senior leadership look weak and that her visibility on this deal needed to be significantly scaled back. An uncomfortable silence had filled the room. I hadn't been privy to that particular conversation, but the chilling revelation resonated deeply, and my absence from that boardroom suddenly felt more significant than any forceful presence could have been. By 2:25 p.m. that afternoon, the final, crushing blow landed. Another formal email arrived from Eurava Aviation. The subject line was blunt and unequivocal: contract status, formal termination notice. The body of the email was brutal in its precision. Due to unapproved and unilateral personnel changes that directly violate the terms outlined in Clause 51C of the executed agreement, Eurava Aviation hereby considers the contract null and void. All associated obligations are immediately dissolved. This time, the email wasn't just addressed to Sterling Tech's executive team. It was also sent to the Investor Relations Group inbox, the Public Relations team, and the personal inboxes of every single member of the board of directors. That night, I stayed late again, not out of any sense of obligation, but simply to observe the quiet unraveling from my surprisingly comfortable vantage point. Mark's corner office door remained firmly shut, the lights inside extinguished. Ashley's office light never flickered on from my distant cubicle. I could clearly hear the rhythmic ticking of the hallway clock, each tick marking another moment of their rapidly escalating crisis. I watched 3 different senior executives leave the building without their jackets, their faces pale and drawn. One of them looked as though he had been visibly crying. Someone from the accounting department walked past my desk and actually stopped. "Are you okay?" she asked hesitantly, her tone a strange mix of awkwardness and genuine concern. I nodded calmly. "Fine," I replied, because for the first time in weeks, I truly was. I no longer felt invisible. I no longer felt powerless. I had written that crucial clause. I had single-handedly protected the integrity of the deal. They had chosen to ignore my contributions. And now, they were forced to watch everything they had so carelessly taken for granted begin to crumble around them. In the end, there was no carefully crafted press release, no strategic spin, just a deafening silence punctuated by the undercurrent of sheer panic, a void in their carefully constructed narrative that they couldn't possibly explain away. And I simply sat in the middle of it all, calm, uninvited, but undeniably still there. It arrived at 9:15 a.m. on a Wednesday morning. I was refilling my coffee cup in the communal break room when my phone buzzed with an incoming call. Unknown number, area code 917, Manhattan, New York City. I almost didn't answer. I was emotionally exhausted, weary of the entire situation, but something, a small voice of intuition perhaps, urged me to pick up. "Olivia Hayes?" a smooth, confident voice inquired on the other end of the line. "Yes, speaking," I replied, my grip tightening slightly on the warm coffee cup. "This is Julian Vance from Omnitech. We spoke briefly a few months ago. I believe the timing wasn't quite right then for a formal offer." I paused for a moment, letting his words sink in. "Yes, I remember," I said finally, a faint smile playing on my lips. "Well, I'm hoping the timing is much better now," he continued, his tone indicating a renewed sense of urgency. "I would very much like to revisit our previous offer with a few significant upgrades." I walked slowly back to my desolate cubicle, the paper coffee cup still warm in my hand, but already forgotten. Julian didn't waste any time with pleasantries. He laid out the details of their revised offer with impressive clarity and precision. Double my current base salary, a substantial equity stake in the rapidly growing company, complete relocation flexibility if I desired it, though he subtly hinted at a preference for me to be based in their primary U.S. office, and a dedicated executive suite on the top floor of their brand-new D.C. headquarters, located just 3 blocks away from Sterling Tech's imposing glass tower. "And one more thing," he added, his voice quieting slightly as he delivered the final, unexpected piece of information. "This wasn't solely our initiative. We were strongly encouraged to reach back out to you." "By whom?" I asked, a flicker of curiosity sparking within me. There was a brief, almost imperceptible pause on the other end of the line. Then he said, "By Klaus Richter. He referred to you as a non-negotiable asset. He specifically mentioned that the Urava deal fell apart because you weren't in charge of the implementation, and he doesn't want to proceed with any future collaborations unless you are personally involved from start to finish." For a long moment, I didn't say anything. I leaned back in the cheap office chair that Sterling Tech had relegated me to and looked at the scuffed corner of the cubicle wall, the silence in the small space feeling strangely profound. I vividly remembered the sting of being erased, of being reduced to a mere set of initials on someone else's paperwork, the power behind those initials completely disregarded. And now here I was, not begging for an opportunity, not having to aggressively pitch my skills. Instead, I was being actively courted, specifically requested, chosen. Julian, I said carefully, my voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions swirling within me. I truly appreciate this generous offer. However, before we discuss the financial specifics any further, there is one crucial condition that must be met. Of course, he replied quickly, without a moment's hesitation. Whatever you need. I personally choose my entire team, I stated firmly. I have the sole and absolute authority to approve every single hire within my division, especially those involved in the critical post-deal integration phase. No exceptions. Another pause on the line, but this time it was much shorter, filled with a sense of decisive agreement. Done, he said simply. Anything else? Yes, I added, a sense of quiet determination hardening my resolve. One more thing. I reached down and opened the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet, pulling out a manila folder that had remained sealed since my trip to Zurich. Inside was a single folded piece of paper, the handwritten note that Klaus Richter had slipped under my hotel room door that significant night. I reread it silently, my heart surprisingly steady this time. I don't just want to oversee deals, I continued, my voice clear and unwavering. I want full life cycle authority, from the initial negotiation to the final implementation, and through every subsequent renewal. Complete end-to-end ownership. You'll have it, Julian answered immediately, his voice conveying absolute certainty. No hesitation, no attempts to negotiate. By the end of the phone call, I hadn't officially accepted the offer, but I certainly hadn't declined it either. I hung up the phone, placing it face down on the cluttered surface of my desk, and gazed out the single small window of my cubicle, watching a flock of birds gracefully cross the expansive sky above the imposing Sterling Tech headquarters tower, the same cold, impersonal glass box that had so recently tried to trap me, then so carelessly replace me. This wasn't about petty revenge anymore. This was about something far more profound, restoration. It was about what truly happens when you not only survive being erased, but emerge stronger and more determined than ever before. You become the name they can no longer afford to move forward without. And this time, I wasn't waiting for anyone's permission. I was the one holding all the cards, the one making the definitive calls. Sitting in a sleek, modern boardroom overlooking the sprawling cityscape of Midtown Manhattan, the bright morning sun streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, polished leather portfolios neatly aligned across a custom-designed walnut conference table. The same high-stakes contract, the same cutting-edge jets, the same staggering billion-dollar figures dancing on the presentation slides. But this time, I wasn't just passively sitting in the room as an overlooked contributor, I was leading the entire discussion. The expensive pen in my hand felt heavier than usual, not with physical weight, but with the immense significance of the moment. Perhaps it was because it wasn't just ink I was about to put to paper. It was a signature that irrevocably signified that everything had fundamentally changed. "Ready when you are, Olivia," Julian said, a confident smile on his face as he slid the final agreement across the polished surface of the table towards me. I looked down at the cover page. The bold lettering clearly stated, total contract value, $1.125 billion. Below that, in equally prominent font, client, Urava Aerospace. Next line, vendor, Omnitech Global. And finally, the single line that truly mattered, executive oversight, Olivia Hayes. My name wasn't just printed on the document, it was strategically embedded into its very core function. Urava Aviation had been crystal clear in their final communication. All stages of post-deal operations, complex logistics, stringent regulatory compliance, and direct client reporting must be managed exclusively by Olivia Hayes. Substitution was explicitly not permitted. They weren't willing to take any more chances with the seamless implementation of this critical agreement. And honestly, neither was I when I finally signed my name with a flourish. I hadn't just closed another significant deal. I had reclaimed my rightful place, not within the confines of Sterling Tech, but far above it. I had quietly exited their building, absorbing their humiliating actions with a stoic silence. I had sat in the isolating stillness of that cramped cubicle while they attempted to rewrite my professional history with someone else's name. Now, I was confidently signing my name to a future that they would have absolutely no part in. The official press release went live at precisely 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. A full-color spread prominently featured on Omnitech's homepage, announcing their landmark achievement. Within minutes, the news had been picked up by major financial news outlets like Bloomberg and Reuters. Omnitech secures landmark multi-billion-dollar jet contract with Eurava Aviation. Former Sterling Tech executive Olivia Hayes to lead new era of aviation strategy. I didn't bother to check Sterling Tech's immediate reaction. I didn't need to, but according to a hastily sent text message from a loyal former colleague still inside the company, Ashley had been in the middle of a leadership strategy huddle when the news article flashed across her LinkedIn feed on a nearby monitor. She had reportedly frozen mid-sentence, her face paling visibly. Mark had read the same article approximately half an hour later in the forced isolation of his corner office. Neither of them had been given any advance warning. No internal memo, no discreet leak, just a very public unveiling that they were powerless to undo. There was no phone call from them, no apologetic message, not even a perfunctory congratulatory email. But I didn't want any of it because in that pivotal moment, I no longer needed their belated acknowledgement. I held all the proof I required, in black and white on official company letterhead, in bold ink, and in undeniable headline news. And the only thing that felt even more satisfying than finally being fully recognized for my invaluable contributions was the quiet knowledge that they had been publicly and professionally replaced by the very person they had so carelessly tried to erase from their own narrative. The elevator doors opened with a soft, almost imperceptible chime. I stepped out onto the top floor of Omnitech's impressive new DC headquarters. Gleaming marble floors stretched out before me, floor-to-ceiling glass offered breathtaking panoramic views of the city, and strategically placed soft-track lighting guided me forward. I reached into the inner pocket of my tailored blazer and pulled out my new business card, the weight of it feeling substantial in my hand. Olivia Hayes, it read, the embossed lettering catching the light, Chief Global Officer, Omnitech. Just 3 short months ago, my name had been unceremoniously removed from a cheap nameplate on a forgotten office door. Now, my name was prominently engraved in the very strategy that would shape the future of an entire global industry. As I made my way towards the main boardroom, I passed a sleek, glass-walled executive lounge where a large, wall-mounted screen silently played muted news footage. I didn't stop, but I couldn't help but notice the headline scrolling across the bottom ticker. Sterling Tech announces significant layoffs. 200 job cuts amid failed multi-billion-dollar deal fallout. CEO Mark Olson expected to resign. I didn't feel any surge of triumphant joy. Not exactly. What I felt was a profound sense of release. They had tried to diminish me, to shrink my professional world, and now their own carefully constructed empire was imploding, collapsing inward like a fragile paper crane carelessly dipped in water. The very people who had so readily dismissed my value had gambled on my silence. But they had tragically mistaken silence for weakness. In reality, it had been my most potent strategy. My phone buzzed softly once in my hand. A text message from an unsaved number. It was from Ashley. Can we please talk? I think I made a terrible mistake. I looked at the message for a long moment, the words shimmering on the bright screen. Then, with a quiet sense of finality, I locked my phone and slipped it back into my bag. No reply. No explanation offered. There was simply nothing left to say. I pushed open the heavy boardroom door and stepped confidently into a room filled with waiting Omnitech executives, their expressions a mixture of anticipation and respect. The energy in the room subtly shifted as I entered. In my hand, I held the outline of a new deal, this one even larger, a staggering $3.1 billion global supply and service agreement. And just like before, it contained one seemingly simple clause, written in plain, unambiguous language. All operational aspects of this agreement must remain under the direct oversight of Olivia Hayes. As I took my designated seat at the head of the polished conference table, my thoughts weren't focused on past grievances or the desire for revenge. My focus was firmly on the future, on building a lasting legacy, not the kind they print in glossy corporate brochures, but the kind that quietly echoes in the rooms where your name carries significant weight, a weight that no fleeting job title could ever truly define. If you have ever been overlooked, underestimated, or unfairly replaced by someone who never truly understood the path you had painstakingly paved, then you understand exactly the quiet satisfaction of this moment. And if you have weathered that storm and emerged on the other side, then I want you to remember this powerful truth: you don't have to shout to achieve victory. You don't have to resort to underhanded tactics to rise above. Sometimes, the most profoundly powerful comeback is when you choose to say nothing at all and simply sign everything that truly matters. If this story resonates with your own experiences, please feel free to leave a comment below. Share where you're reading from, and if you've ever faced a similar situation of being replaced. I'm genuinely interested in hearing your stories. And please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because out there, someone else is likely sitting in silence right now, quietly wondering if their contributions truly matter. Let's collectively remind them that they absolutely do.